I've all but lost the use of my legs. This is what MS has done. It's progressively disabling me. And it's incurable. But I wouldn't swap with any of you because I'm very healthy. I wanted to share with you tonight how I think about health, how I've been generously compensated for having MS, how I used to be haunted by the prospect of my MS becoming progressive, and when it did, how I now live very easily with that. So how I think about health. I've let go of the things that I can't do. I used to play golf, I used to cycle, I used to be very active. But I can't do that anymore, so I've just let go of them. There's no point in clinging on to things that you can't do. It only annoys you. And I've developed a curiosity, and I now feed that curiosity. I have the time that I got back to follow my curiosity. I read, and I unpack the insights in what I read so that I can share those. Illness, I've accepted. It's part of who I am. I don't fight it. I don't try and shut it out. It's in me. It's not going to go away. And I can waste a lot of energy worrying about it and fighting it, but it won't go away. So I've accepted it. It's behind the door. It sometimes makes itself present. And I embrace it when it does. And it goes back behind the door. I have great well-being, but I protect it. So I get a lot of spasticity in my legs and cramps, and I can take drugs for that, but they upset my stomach. So I don't take them because my well-being is more impacted by the drugs and the upset than it is by the cramps and the pain. And if I don't have well-being, well, then I can't be positive. And positivity is really important to my ability to socialize, to meet people, to share the insights that I've had. And we all need relationships and conversation to allow us to clear our minds, to be able to think clearly. If you don't see how your words land on others and you don't feel their body language coming back to you, you don't really know how your thoughts are being seen. You don't get a chance to clear your mind. And this is something that is really important. You can't have meaningful conversations. You can't really know yourself. Was I always like this? God, no. About 11 years ago, I was 47. Everything was great. Life was good, much to look forward to. Playing golf, really involved. And one morning I woke up and it felt like the skin on my legs had shrunk and had become too tight for my ankles. And I got really worried about this. For about a week, I thought that I might have a tumor on my spine and that my lights were going to go out, that I wasn't going to survive. And when I saw a doctor, she said to me that I had transverse myelitis. I'd never heard of that. So I said to her, will you write that down for me, please? And when I went home, I looked it up. And after a couple of hours, I realized I was going to have multiple sclerosis. And that was both a shock and a relief. The shock that I would have MS and the relief that I would be alive. And my wife and I decided then that we weren't going to tell anybody about this. We didn't tell our families, we didn't tell our friends, we didn't tell our children. We didn't want to be seen differently. We didn't want to be excluded from things. And I didn't want that if I ever needed a job, that I would be excluded from that job or the prospect of getting one by the fact that I had a disease that was unpredictable, that nobody would be able to tell where it's going. Nobody would take that risk. And because this couldn't be the conversation around the dinner table all the time, and there was nobody else to talk to about it, it went around and around in my brain. It haunted the quiet moments when things were not busy. It was always there in the shadows, ever present, watching, waiting, haunting. And then about 3 years later, it turned progressive. And I had a real difficulty with how should I think about this. I liken it to being drunk. The drunk's problem was that it was more the width of the road that was bothering him than the length of it. So he was going over and back between the ditches rather than getting on down the road. And the ditches for me were, on the one hand, that I felt that if I accepted MS, that I might become depressed, I'd fall into victimhood, and it'd be why me. And on the other ditch, it was the fear that if I fought this really, really hard, that I might fail and I might end up in this ditch over here. But I had to fight. So I started different diets, taking supplements. There were separate meals for me at home. There were separate shopping lists. And when we were invited out, it would be, what's on the menu? No, I can't eat that. No, I can't eat that. I was turning everybody's life upside down, family life and friends. And I didn't realize that. I'd become completely self-absorbed. I had lost my self-awareness. And not only was I not getting down the road, I wasn't even on the road. I was firmly in the ditch, and I had no idea that I was. And then a friend of mine said, you should get a second opinion on this. And I was going to the States on a trip, and there's a superb Center for Research in University of California, San Francisco. So I booked an appointment with a neurologist there. And the big question I had to ask him was, what's my progression likely to be? And he said to me, you have a progressive disease, and progressive diseases progress. And I thought, hang on, I've just come halfway across the world. That isn't great value for money. And when I got home, things began to change a little bit. The changes started like this. The first thing I realized was that I had a small chance of slowing my progression. I had a very high risk of alienating everybody that was important to me. I had a light bulb moment when I realized that I don't get to control what happens to me in life, but I do get to control how I think about it and react to it. And when I thought back on what the neurologist said in San Francisco said to me, I realized that he had not sentenced me to the tyranny of a prognosis. Because if he had told me, this is going to be your prognosis, that would have entered my brain. It would have invaded my subconscious, and I would have fitted everything that happened into that prognosis, and that would have become my outcome. Instead, he allowed me to choose my own realities, to think about this disease in the way that I wanted to think about it. And then later that year, a friend of mine got terminally ill and died. And I began to realize what's important in life and the possibilities for the things that I can do rather than the things that are no longer available to me. And I got a perspective on something my mother has always said. She said, if everybody in this room put their troubles on the table, we'd each walk out with our own. I wouldn't swap with anybody. I'd give it back, but I wouldn't swap. So I began to accept my MS. I accepted the crutches. I accepted the hand controls in the car to drive. I accepted eventually that I needed a wheelchair. And eventually, we remodeled our house so that we could live downstairs because I couldn't get up the stairs anymore. And what I've realized is that life gives you compensations for the challenges that are put in front of you if you're open to looking for them. And I've been compensated generously with being able to pursue my curiosity. And I found a voice that I would never have found otherwise if I didn't have MS. So the important things in life become apparent to you. And what's apparent to me is the importance of my relationships, my amazing wife and family, my fantastic friends, These are the important things. I've begun to understand that there is much for me still to learn. There's much for me still to be positive about. There's much for me to look forward to. And this is why I'm healthy. And this is why I wouldn't swap with anyone. Thank you.